Il y a effectivement un problème, monsieur.
Who the hell do you think you are?
Two powerful men sat in Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, speaking what they believed was a secret language, mocking the young waitress serving their $1,000 wine. They had no idea she understood every cruel word. They had no idea she was the daughter of the man whose life they had destroyed. They were about to learn that some secrets don't stay buried, and the most devastating truths can be delivered in perfect, fluent French. Before diving in, let me know where you are tuning in from today. I'd love to know how far this story travels. Now let's get back to the story. The crystal chandeliers of Maison Lumière cast golden shadows across tables, where Chicago's elite conducted business over courses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. In this temple of privilege, conversations flowed in whispers, and the staff moved like ghosts seen but never heard, present but never acknowledged. Claire Fontaine had mastered this invisible ballet. At 26, she glided between tables with practiced grace, her every movement economical and precise. She could describe the wine's terroir in 3 languages, anticipate a diner's needs before they realized them, and maintain perfect composure even as her heart carried the weight of a shattered life. To the clientele, she was simply the waitress, efficient, forgettable furniture in their world of power plays and million-dollar deals. None saw the shadows behind her calm gray eyes. None knew that the hands clearing their plates had once held academic honors from the Sorbonne. None could guess that her brilliant mind, now focused on memorizing specials, had once dissected complex economic theories with professors who called her a prodigy. That life had died 3 years ago with a single phone call. Her father, Dr. Gabriel Fontaine, had been a visionary biochemist whose revolutionary water purification technology promised to transform developing nations. His small company, Fontaine Biotech, was his life's work, a beacon of hope built on the dream that science could heal the world. Then came the wolves in expensive suits. A ruthless private equity firm had orchestrated a systematic destruction of her father's company. They spread lies about the technology's stability, bribed key researchers, and manufactured a crisis that sent the company's value plummeting. When they swooped in with their rescue offer, her father's life's work was sold for pennies on the dollar. The shock triggered a massive stroke that left Dr. Fontaine partially paralyzed. Claire had abandoned her doctoral studies in Paris without hesitation, returning to Chicago to become his caregiver. The mountain of medical bills and corporate debt forced her into a life she never imagined. Maison Lumière, with its wealthy patrons and generous tips, was her lifeline, a means to keep her father comfortable in his care facility, and later, to pay for a burial that honored his memory. Every night, she locked away her past in a staff locker beside her worn economics textbook, smoothed her blonde hair into a tight bun, and became the ghost of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. Tonight, the ghost was about to be seen. They swept into Maison Lumière at precisely 8 o'clock, their presence creating invisible ripples through the restaurant's carefully maintained atmosphere. Victor Blackthorne led the way, a name that struck fear into boardrooms across the nation. In his late 50s, with silver hair and eyes like Arctic ice, he moved with the predatory confidence of a man who had never heard the word no. Behind him followed his lieutenant, Derek Vaughan, younger and hungrier, with the desperate eagerness of a courtier seeking his king's approval. He laughed too loudly at Blackthorne's remarks and scanned every room as if calculating its worth and threat level. Tonight, Blackthorne seemed different, more agitated than usual. He kept checking his phone, his jaw tight with tension. Something was troubling the man who usually wore invincibility like armor. They were seated in Claire's section, the prime corner table with panoramic city views reserved for modern gods of commerce. As Claire approached with practiced serenity, her face a perfect mask of professional courtesy, she noticed something odd. Blackthorne's hands were trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. Good evening, gentlemen. Still or sparkling water? Blackthorn dismissed her with a wave, already deep in conversation with Derek about what seemed to be damage control rather than their usual conquest planning. Derek was the one who answered, "Sparkling. 2 bottles of San Pellegrino, and bring the wine list. We'll need something strong tonight." As Claire poured water, she couldn't help overhearing fragments of their conversation. They weren't discussing acquisitions. They were discussing problems. Big ones. "The journalist is getting too close," Derek was saying in hushed English. "She's connected 3 more dots since last week. If she links Aurora to the Senate committee findings, she won't." Blackthorn cut him off. "We've handled journalists before. This isn't just any journalist, Victor. This is Sarah Chun from the Post. She's untouchable. And she's Gabriel Fontaine's goddaughter." Claire's blood turned to ice. Her father's goddaughter? Sarah Chun, the investigative reporter who'd won Pulitzers for exposing corporate corruption, had been investigating her father's death? How had Claire never known about this connection? Blackthorn's face darkened. Gabriel had too many friends in too many places. Even dead, he's still causing problems. The casual cruelty of the statement hit Claire like a physical blow. But beneath the shock, her mind was racing. There was more to this story, much more than she'd ever suspected. She placed menus before them, her movements robotic. "My name is Claire, and I'll be your server this evening." Blackthorn finally looked at her, his gaze cold and appraising. Then, perhaps needing to assert dominance after showing vulnerability, he turned to Derek, and the language changed. He began in crisp Parisian French, his tone shifting to conspiratorial mockery. "Look at her." Claire's training kicked in automatically maintain composure, remain invisible, but every nerve in her body was on high alert. Derek leaned in with a cruel grin. "Pretty little waitress. Certainly not the brightest bulb, I'd wager. Perfect for our purposes tonight." Their purposes? What could they possibly need her for? The ordering process was a display of casual dominance. Blackthorn ordered quickly, efficiently, like a man who wanted to get to the real business at hand. Oysters Rockefeller and steak tartare to start. 2 bone-in ribeyes, medium rare. And the 2005 Petrus. Don't waste time with the tasting. The Petrus alone cost $5,000. 2 months of her father's care fees, treated it as an afterthought. As Claire retrieved the wine from the cellar, she noticed him pull out a small device, a white noise generator, and place it discreetly on the table. "Background noise," he murmured to Derek in English. Too many sensitive ears in a place like this. Then they switched to French, and the real conversation began. Blackthorn asked if Derek had the documents. Derek reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. "Everything is here. Fontaine's latest research, his personal notes, and the other thing." Claire's world tilted. They had her father's research? How was that possible? She'd been told everything had been destroyed in the company's dissolution. "Excellent," Blackthorn purred. He never suspected, did he? Even at the end? No, he believed his best friend was trying to save him. Claire's hands stilled on the wine decanter. Best friend? Her father's best friend had been Dr. Richard Hartwell, his research partner for over 20 years. The man who had delivered the eulogy at her father's funeral. The man who had held Claire as she wept, promising to honor her father's memory. Derek continued. Hartwell played his part perfectly. Even now, the daughter believes her father died from a natural stroke. The wine decanter slipped from Claire's numb fingers, but she caught it just in time. Natural stroke? What were they implying? Blackthorn chuckled darkly. If she knew what was really in her father's final notes. If she knew that Richard Hartwell was administering the medication that caused the stroke. The restaurant spun around Claire. Uncle Richard, the man who had been like family, who had visited her father daily in the hospital, who had insisted on handling all of Gabriel's medical care to ease the burden on Claire, had been poisoning him? She forced herself to continue pouring wine. but her mind was reeling. If this was true, her father hadn't died from the shock of losing his company. He'd been murdered, slowly, deliberately murdered by the man he trusted most. Derek asked why they didn't just kill him outright. Too suspicious, Blackthorne replied. But a man who just lost his life's work, slowly developing neurological problems, then a stroke. No one asks questions. And it gave us time to recover all his hidden research files. Claire finished decanting with robotic precision, but inside, 3 years of grief was transforming into something far more dangerous. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was premeditated murder. As Claire served the main course, her mind raced through implications. Her father hadn't just been murdered. He'd been murdered to prevent him from exposing something enormous. Blackthorne was checking his phone again, his face darkening. Damn, Sarah Chun just published another article. She's getting too close. Derek asked nervously what she was saying. Blackthorne read from his phone. She's found links between Aurora and 3 other acquisitions. And she's asking questions about Fontaine's death. Claire's heart leaped. Sarah Chun, her father's goddaughter, was investigating his death? You understand now why we needed Fontaine dead, Blackthorne was saying. What he had discovered about Aurora was only the beginning. Derek nodded gravely. The Pentagon contracts, the military applications of his technology. Exactly. If the public had known that his purification technology could be reverse-turned into a biological weapon capable of poisoning the water supply of entire nations. Claire's blood turned to ice. Her father's life-saving technology designed to bring clean water to the world's poorest had been perverted into an instrument of mass destruction. And he'd found out? The government is paying us billions now, Blackthorne continued with satisfaction. And thanks to Harwell, we have all the patents. Fontaine Biodefense will be the largest biological weapons company in the world. The irony was sick. They'd named their weapons company after the man they'd murdered to steal his technology. Derek pulled out a tablet, showing Blackthorne something that made both men smile. The first tests were conclusive. Deployment in Syria begins next month. Claire's legs nearly gave out. They were planning to test biological weapons on civilians, using technology her father had created to save lives. And the best part? If anyone ever discovers the truth, we can blame it all on Gabriel Fontaine, the man who accidentally created a weapon while trying to do good. They weren't just planning to profit from her father's murder. They were planning to make him history's scapegoat for their atrocities. As the evening progressed, Claire moved through her duties mechanically, while every fiber of her being focused on the French conversation at table 12. She had heard enough. The scope of the conspiracy was overwhelming, not just corporate raiding, but systematic murder, weapons development, and planned genocide. But she realized something else. They thought she was invisible, uncomprehending, harmless. They had no idea they were confessing their crimes to the one person in the world most motivated to destroy them. The stakes arrived, and Claire set them down personally. She didn't retreat. She stood straight, chin up, and looked Victor Blackthorne directly in the eye. For the first time all evening, he was forced to truly see her, not as a function, but as a person. He frowned, annoyed by her presence. "Is there a problem?" he asked in English, sharp with irritation. Claire took a slow, deep breath, feeling a strange, terrifying calm settle over her. It was the calm of a general surveying a battlefield, calculating odds, choosing the precise moment to strike. She had information that could topple governments. She had less than 24 hours to save a woman's life. And she was facing the men who had murdered her father. The time for invisibility was over. She met his cold gaze and held it. Then, in flawless academic French, tinged with the educated accent of the Sorbonne, a voice low but carrying the cold authority of a judge, she spoke.
Il y a effectivement un problème, monsieur.
Who the hell do you think you are?
The effect was instantaneous. Blackthorn froze mid-motion, his fork hovering over his steak. The wine-flushed confidence drained from his face, replaced by pure shock. His jaw went slack, his cold blue eyes widening in stunned disbelief. Derek choked on his wine, sputtering into his napkin, his face turning blotchy red. He stared at Claire, then at Blackthorn, his mind visibly failing to process what was happening. The silence at their table became a vacuum. Claire didn't waver. She held Blackthorn's gaze, her own eyes like chips of gray flint. She continued in the same lethal French. First, I'd like to correct a small point of grammar. When speaking of deployment in Syria, one should specify whether you mean biological weapons or crimes against humanity. Both are technically correct. It was a surgeon's cut precise, devastating, utterly unexpected. She hadn't just revealed understanding. She had demonstrated that she'd absorbed every classified detail of their conspiracy. Derek's face had gone bone white. He reached for his water glass with shaking hands. Blackthorn's expression was hardening into something dangerous. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled in English. Claire stayed in French, maintaining absolute control. An interesting question. "I am someone who just discovered her father didn't die from a natural stroke. Someone who now knows that Richard Hartwell, the man she called Uncle Richard, poisoned Gabriel Fontaine on your orders." The color drained from both men's faces. The conspiracy they thought was buried was being excavated in real time by the one person they'd never considered a threat. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "I am also someone who knows you plan to assassinate Sarah Chun tomorrow night. Someone who knows about Fontaine biodefense and your Pentagon contracts. Someone who heard every word of your confession." She let the words sink in, watching the dawning horror on their faces as they realized the magnitude of their exposure. Then came the final revelation.
Surtout, messieurs, je suis Claire Fontaine. And unlike my father, I know exactly who my enemies are.
Give me that recorder!
The name hit like a thunderclap. Blackthorn physically recoiled as if she'd slapped him. Derek's wine glass slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Claire reached into her apron and withdrew something that made both men's blood freeze. A small digital recorder, its red light blinking steadily. 63 minutes of complete confessions, she said with deadly calm. Names, dates, methods, and tomorrow night, the exact time of your next planned murder. Blackthorn's chair crashed backward as he surged to his feet, his face contorted with rage and terror. "Give me that recorder," he snarled, reaching across the table. But Claire had anticipated this. She stepped back smoothly, slipping the device into her pocket while simultaneously pressing a button on her phone. Instantly, every speaker in Maison Lumiere crackled to life. Blackthorn's own voice filled the restaurant, speaking in clear English. The first tests were conclusive. Deployment in Syria begins next month. The effect was electric. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every patron in Chicago's most exclusive restaurant was suddenly listening to a confession of war crimes. Once we eliminate Sarah Chun and recover all of Fontaine's files, Richard will have a tragic heart attack. Derek was on his feet now too, panic in his eyes. "Turn it off," he screamed at Claire. "I can't," Claire replied calmly in English, her French accent making her words ring with authority. "It's streaming live to 12 different news organizations, the FBI, the Pentagon Inspector General's office, and the International Criminal Court in The Hague." The lie was perfect, delivered with such confidence that both men believed it completely.
Just confessed to war crimes in front of 200 of Chicago's most powerful
You
people.
stupid girl. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I own senators. I have judges in my pocket.
Claire continued. "Do you really think they're all going to keep quiet to protect you?" Blackthorn's face was purple with rage. "You stupid girl. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I own senators. I have judges in my pocket." "Had," Claire corrected. Past tense. Because in about 30 minutes, every major news network in America is going to be running the story. Security guards appeared at their table. The Mater D addressed Blackthorne grimly. "Monsieur Blackthorne, I think it's time for you to leave. My establishment does not cater to war criminals." Claire turned to address the now silent restaurant. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. My name is Claire Fontaine. 3 years ago, these men murdered my father, Dr. Gabriel Fontaine, to steal his water purification technology. They've now perverted his life-saving invention into biological weapons, and they were planning to assassinate Washington Post journalist Sarah Chun tomorrow night." As security escorted the two conspirators toward the exit, Blackthorne turned back for one final threat. "This isn't over. You have no idea the forces you're dealing with." Claire met his gaze one last time, utterly unafraid. "You're right. It's not over. But for you, it's just beginning." The restaurant erupted in spontaneous applause as the door closed behind them. Claire stood in the center of it all, no longer invisible, no longer silent. 1 year later, Claire stood in the headquarters of the Fontaine Institute for Global Water Security, looking out at Lake Michigan's endless blue expanse. The building had been constructed with proceeds from the civil settlements, blood money transformed into something her father would have been proud of. Victor Blackthorne was serving life in federal prison for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violations of the Biological Weapons Convention. Derek Vaughn was cooperating with international investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Most satisfying of all, Richard Hartwell, the man who had betrayed her father's trust and administered the poison that killed him, was serving consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The Fontaine Institute now operated in 14 countries, providing clean water technology to communities that needed it most. Every installation bore a simple plaque, in memory of Dr. Gabriel Fontaine, who believed science should heal the world. Sarah Chun had won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative series exposing the conspiracy. She'd also become one of Claire's closest friends and the Institute's most vocal advocate. The goddaughter Gabriel never got to raise was now helping to fulfill his dreams. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the smallest one. The young waitress who now worked at Maison Lumiere, a bright economics student named Maria, who reminded Claire of herself, had no idea that the woman who left generous tips and kind words was once just like her. Table 12, where the confrontation had taken place, now bore a small brass plaque, reserved for those who speak truth to power. Franco Baptiste had insisted on it, claiming it was good for business. Claire suspected it was good for his conscience. Claire reflected on the strange paths that justice could take. Her father's murder had led to the exposure of a massive conspiracy. That conspiracy's unraveling had created opportunities to fulfill Gabriel's humanitarian dreams on a scale he never imagined. She thought about the evening at Maison Lumiere that had started at all two arrogant men speaking what they thought was a secret language, never dreaming that their words would topple an empire built on blood and lies. They had seen her as invisible, voiceless, powerless. They had been catastrophically wrong. Claire Fontaine was no longer the ghost who haunted Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. She was the living embodiment of her father's values, wielding influence and resources that those two men could never have imagined. But more than that, she had become something they feared most, a voice for the voiceless, a champion for those who labored in invisibility, a reminder that truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it's buried. The architecture of justice, Claire had learned, wasn't built in a day. It was constructed one honest word at a time, one courageous act at a time, one choice at a time to speak truth to power regardless of the consequences. Her father had taught her to believe in the power of science to heal the world. The men who killed him had taught her something else entirely. But sometimes, the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't sophisticated technology or vast resources. Sometimes it's just a waitress who refuses to remain silent. As the sun set over Lake Michigan, casting golden light across the water that would soon flow clean and pure to communities around the world, Claire smiled. Her father's dreams were finally becoming reality, built on the foundation of justice his daughter had created by speaking truth in perfect, devastating French. The ghost of Maison Lumiere had found her voice, and the world was better for it. What did you think of the story? Share your thoughts in the comment below. I'd love to hear your stories.